The story of a young man named Sporus is not a myth. It's not a rumor, not a symbol, not an exaggerated legend. It is written down in Roman chronicles and confirmed by the greatest historians of the time, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and Tacitus. Sporus was a youth who, by direct order of Emperor Nero, was forcibly castrated and then presented to the Roman people as his wife. Even for the Roman Empire, where emperors were used to getting everything they wanted, this was shocking. It was not just a strange whim. It was a public gesture, showing that Nero's power had no limits, not over politics, not over life, not even over the basic rules of society. We know almost nothing about where Sporus came from or who his family was. His name appears in historical writings around 65 CE, when Nero's rule was already nearing its end. He was described as delicate, refined, with features many called feminine. That look caught the emperor's eye. At the same time, Nero was grieving. His second wife, Poppaea Sabina, had died. She was pregnant when she died. According to Suetonius, it was Nero himself who caused her death, striking her in the stomach during a sudden outburst of rage. Her death hit Nero hard. He held grand ceremonies in her honor. He spoke to her statues. He avoided any talk of how she had actually died. And then Nero saw Sporus. The resemblance to Poppaea was so strong that it turned his grief into an obsession. Nero decided to make Sporus the living image of his dead wife. The first step was brutal. He ordered Sporus to be castrated, without anesthesia, without mercy. The goal was to stop him from developing into a man, to keep his youthful, feminine look forever. After the operation, Nero began calling Sporus his wife. He dressed him in women's clothing. He taught him the manners of Roman noblewomen. He gave him jewels, imperial titles, and then held a wedding, a full ceremony with blessings, vows, and celebrations. Cassius Dio wrote that every ritual was followed, even the giving of a dowry. Nero made it clear to everyone. Sporus was now filling the place Poppaea had left behind. The Roman elite were stunned. The Senate stayed silent. The public reacted with confused silence, a mix of fear and disgust. Sporus himself hardly spoke. He didn't decide anything for himself. He was simply there to play the role Nero had chosen for him. From that point on, Sporus lived at court as the emperor's wife. He appeared at all official ceremonies, public events, and performances. This was not some secret arrangement. Nero made sure everyone saw and treated Sporus like an empress. When Nero traveled to Greece for a series of performances and competitions, Sporus went with him. He wore the clothes of a Roman matron, a veil over his face, and was surrounded by female attendants. Nero acted as if they were truly married. But behind this show was a young man forced to live as someone he was not, his very identity controlled by the emperor. Chroniclers say Nero's obsession came from deep grief for Poppaea. For him, Sporus was not just a companion or lover, he was a way to bring back the wife he had killed. Cassius Dio wrote bitterly, "Nero turned a boy into a woman and turned his own grief into a public performance." Some in Rome saw this as one more sign that Nero had gone too far. This wasn't just about two men being together, something that could happen in Roman society without scandal. This was about using imperial power to force someone into a role, to turn a person into a living symbol of an emperor's obsession. What's most haunting is that no words of Sporus survive. We have no idea what he thought, felt, or wanted. We only know what others wrote, and they cared more about Nero's scandal than about Sporus himself. Historians think Sporus may have received riches, protection, and privileges in exchange for his position. But the truth is, The forced castration and the public role were acts of cruelty, even for the standards of the first century. Sporus was not a lucky favorite. He was a victim trapped in the hands of a tyrant. He lived under constant watch. He could not resist, speak freely, or escape. His identity was not his own. He existed as a symbol, and like all symbols under a dictatorship, his life depended entirely on the will of the ruler who had made him. By 68 CE, Nero's rule was collapsing. Rebellions broke out. Legions swore loyalty to other generals. The Senate turned against him. Nero fled Rome with a few loyal followers, and Sporus was among them. He stayed by Nero's side until the very end. Ancient accounts differ. Some say Sporus cried as Nero prepared to take his own life. Others claim he held the emperor's head as Nero stabbed himself in the throat with the help of a servant. But all agree Sporus was there when Nero died. After Nero's death, Sporus's position disappeared instantly. Without the emperor's protection, he was nothing. To the new regime, he was an embarrassment, a living reminder of Nero's excesses. Power passed to General Galba. He wanted to erase all traces of Nero's rule. Nero's guard was disbanded. The court was purged. People like Sporus were removed from the imperial circle. Suetonius wrote that Galba saw Sporus as so shameful that he wanted him erased from history entirely. Cassius Dio says Sporus was soon forced to kill himself. The official reason? Participation in the excesses of the former regime. But the real reason was clear. They wanted no reminder of Nero's darkest acts. There was no funeral, no honors, no grave marked with his name. Just as he had lived under an identity forced on him, Sporus died without the right to decide his fate. His story is one of the most public acts of cruelty in Roman history. It was not simply about a powerful man and a vulnerable youth. It was the turning of a personal fantasy into political reality. Over the centuries, Sporus has been seen as a victim, as a symbol of imperial abuse, even as a figure in debates about identity. But what happened to him was a tragedy of his own time, shaped by the structures of Roman power. Today, his name survives only in the margins of history books. Not because he left his own words, he left none, but because his silence is impossible to ignore. There are no monuments, no statues, no portraits. Only a few lines written by chroniclers who mentioned him in passing. He remains a silent warning from a time when one man's will could strip away another's life, identity, and voice, leaving behind nothing but a ghost.